Oh, it's good to see everybody this morning. We had a tearjerker yesterday. It's tough to say goodbye, even when you've just met someone. It's tough to say goodbye and know that you won't see them anymore in this lifetime. But it was good to have been here yesterday, good to have experienced what we did. Solomon made the point that it's better to go to a house of mourning than it is to a house of feasting. And the reason for that is because we all need to know and consider every once in a while that we don't live forever, that we will die. And being prepared for that is what is so important about living life in the first place. I'd like to share a few thoughts with you this morning about, well, what's up there, but it has to do with the power of words, the power of the tongue, what we can do with it, what we can accomplish with it, and what we can destroy with it. And I'd like for you to turn, if you would, to the book of Ephesians, where I want to read where we ended last time. We were talking about this new life that we've been given and what we should do with this new life. I'd like to read again from verse 17 and go and stop where we stopped last time. Paul writes to this, in this letter, and I've told you before how I feel about this letter, that this is a general letter that was sent out everywhere. We happened to get one, keep one, or find one that was addressed to the church at Ephesus. And I say that because there are no individual people mentioned in this. The toughest church that Paul ever dealt with, the church at Corinth, he mentions a lot of people that were there. Here, where he spent more time than anywhere else, if this is to the church at Ephesus, he doesn't mention anyone. But it's a good letter for every church, anywhere, anytime. Here's what he writes. So this I say and affirm together with the Lord, that you walk no longer just as the Gentiles also walk, in the futility of their minds. You know what futility is? Futility is when whatever you do makes no difference whatsoever. Packing sand down a rat hole, that's futility. And I've heard of that when you're doing something and it has no effect whatsoever in this world. Sometimes fighting a fire is packing sand down a rat hole because it's growing faster than you can do anything about it. He says, I don't want you to walk just as the Gentiles also walk in the futility of their mind, being darkened in their understanding. Darkened. No light. You know, enlightened people are people who understand, people that know. He doesn't want them to be darkened in their understanding, excluded from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their hearts. People are ignorant for a lot of different reasons. The one thing that's inexcusable is when you're ignorant because you don't want to learn, because you refuse to learn. And they, having become callous, that's what will keep you from learning, becoming callous, have given themselves over to sensuality for the practice of every kind of impurity with greediness. Not just doing it, but being greedy about doing it. But you did not learn Christ in this way. Here's what is so important for us to know. That if we wind up being evil at the end of our lives, it won't be because Jesus taught us to. It won't be because we learned it from Christ. It'll be because we either didn't learn it because we never were exposed to it or because we didn't want to know. If indeed you have heard Him and have been taught in Him, just as truth is in Jesus. that in reference to your former manner of life, you lay aside the old self which is being corrupted in accordance with the lusts of deceit, and that you be renewed in the spirit of your mind. You know, this renewing that he talks about right here comes with the rebirth, and it starts growing at that point like a child starts growing when it's born. Longing for the pure milk of the Word, Peter says we should grow in respect to our salvation. That you be renewed in the spirit of your mind and put on the new self, which in the likeness of God has been created in righteousness and holiness of the truth. Created in righteousness. You know, Peter writes in 2 Peter that all of this that we see around us is to be burned up with intense heat. And since it's going to be destroyed, what kind of people ought we to be? Righteous. Righteous, because Peter goes on to say that this new heavens and new earth that we're looking for is going to be where righteousness dwells. You don't have to lock your doors. Don't have to worry about someone doing you wrong. It will be where righteousness dwells. Sin won't mess this one up. He says, therefore, laying aside falsehood, speak truth, each one of you, with his neighbor. And here's the reason. Because we're members one of another. Do not be angry, or be angry. I don't think it's possible to not get angry. Well, maybe it is if you have no spine. But I'll tell you what, a person who has no ability to get angry, old Homer Haley once made a statement from the pulpit, and it shocked me and it shocked a lot of other people. He says, the man that can't get angry is a worthless pile of flesh. Wow, that's a potent statement. But that doesn't mean that you sin with that anger. It means that righteous indignation should move you to do the right thing, to stand up for the right thing, to be the kind of person that is an immovable rock on the part of God. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. Here's where most of us fail. We get angry and then we stew about it instead of correcting the issue, instead of making it right. He said, do not let the sun go down on your anger, and do not give the devil a place. This says opportunity, but you look in the footnotes, the most literal translation of that is not opportunity, it's place. Don't give the devil a spot in your brain. Don't give him a foothold in your mind. It says, he who steals, everybody has their faults. Everybody has something that's wrong about them. Now, he who steals, if you're a thief, what on earth can cause you to not be a thief any longer? I mean, Paul can just say, don't steal. But how do you fix it? How do you fix the mentality that causes you to be a thief? Have you ever noticed that the Bible doesn't just say, don't do this? It'll say, don't do this, but do this. Take this out and put this in. So when Paul says, don't be a thief, he goes on and he tells you what to put in its place. I'll tell you how you can never, ever be tempted to steal again. That is, if you work for the purpose of finding somebody to help with it. Finding somebody that you can give to help, to bring them up. If you have that in your mind as a motive for living, you will never, ever be a thief again. He goes on. He says, let no unwholesome, again, that's not the best translation, because the word is rotting. Let no rotting word come out of your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification, according to the need of the moment, so that it may give grace to those who hear. Wow. There's two different extremes that we're talking about here. One is this rotting word that comes out and all it does is tear down and destroy the power of the tongue. He says, but only such a word as is good for edification. That's building up. So I know what's opposite of what he says here about the rotting word. The rotting word is destroying or tearing down. He says, don't have any word like that coming out of your mouth. But only such a word is good for building up, according to the need of the moment, so that it may give grace. Now think about this. Grace is undeserved favor, unmerited. Something somebody hasn't earned. They don't deserve it, but you're giving it anyway. This is just like the reason for changing from being a thief, is to help somebody that has need. Well, you know, somebody that you're dealing with, that you're arguing with, that is being obstinate. How hard is it to do the right thing, to say the right thing, to have the right words at the right time to solve the problem, to make it better, to create something instead of destroy something? I'll tell you what, I love words. I love words. And I can use some words. But the problem is having the right motivation behind the words is the tough part. That's what is so difficult. To know the need right then, right at that moment, the right word to say, the right thing to do, to build that or to fix that is the toughest part. So Paul says, not so that you can give them what they deserve, it's not so that you can be fair with them, but so that you can give them grace that is needed at that moment to fix whatever's wrong. And here's the thing, every time you have any kind of discussion with anybody, every time there's any kind of problem, you take turns. They say something, you say something. That's what we call communication. It's what we call conversing. It's back and forth. It's reciprocal. And quite often, reciprocity is getting even. But that's not what Paul's talking about. What Paul is talking about is when something is done, when something is said, it's your turn, how are you going to handle it? How are you going to deal with them? Is it to give them grace, a favor they have not earned from you? They have not been fair with you, but what is your goal for them? Here is the love that is taught in Christianity. You want to know what Jesus would do? He said the right thing at the right time for the right purpose. And it was always to make things better, even if it was a reproving or a rebuking. Even when he says, you brood of vipers, it was done for the right reason to correct a problem. Sometimes criticism has to be there. But what Paul said in this same chapter back earlier, I want you to back up with me. Back up with me over to chapter 4 and let's see, where is that? In verse 15, he says, but speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in all aspects into Him who is the head, even Christ. I want to look at a few different places. Now this, we had it up there just a second ago. The passage that we read. Let me get back there. One of the things that I really love about this and that is so important, let me skip that one. I want to go back. We're running out of time here, so I want to go back to Proverbs chapter 6. I want to look at that for just a second here. You know, Solomon wrote a lot of things. And Solomon was a wise man. Now, before you look at Solomon too closely, the word wise does not necessarily mean doing the right thing. The word wise in the Greek language is the word Sophia, which means understanding how the world works. Solomon understood what works and what doesn't work. Didn't mean he lived by it. It means he understood it. In chapter 6 and verse 16 of Proverbs, here's what Solomon writes. There are 6 things which the Lord hates. 7 which are an abomination to him. Now I'll tell you what, I don't know of anything in the Bible that's ever referred to as an abomination that God likes. I think you can rest assured, if it says that this is an abomination, it is never, ever a good thing. Some people try and turn that around. There is no turning around an abomination. It says haughty eyes. Haughty eyes. I told you what my grandma used to say to me when I'd get a little snippy with her or something. Son, you better get down off of that high horse. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. She knew how to straighten me out like stretching a string. Haughty eyes. That is when you look at the world from a position of superiority. When you think you're better than somebody else. When you think you know everything. When you can't be taught anything. Haughty eyes followed by a lying tongue. You notice how everything in the Bible, everything in the New Testament, it starts out Jesus saying in John 8 and 32, he says, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Some of us don't really care that much for the truth. I worry about some of my own family, some of my own children, grandchildren, that don't want to hear the truth. The truth is not that friendly sometimes, because the truth can be really, really painful. Like when Jesus looked at those Pharisees and said, you brood of snakes. I don't know how you can take that as a compliment. That's not one of those things that you go away feeling good about after somebody says it about you. But there was a purpose in Jesus saying that to them. What was it that the serpent did way back there in Genesis chapter 3? He lied. He was deceitful. He was destructive. He was trying to destroy them. So he says, here's 6 things. 7 that the Lord hates. Haughty eyes and a lying tongue. Hands that shed innocent blood. A heart that devises wicked plans. Feet that run rapidly to evil. A false witness who utters lies. And one who spreads strife among brethren. You know what were the Beatitudes? The Beatitudes starts out with blessed are the poor in spirit. That's just the opposite of this haughty eyes. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth. He goes down through all of these things that are just exactly opposite of what is described here that God hates. The term blessed are means well spoken of. God will speak well of people who have the characteristics in Matthew 5 rather than these characteristics right here. But notice in all of these Hebrew parallelisms, like this one, it starts with the least and it goes to the greatest. Do you know what he ends this with here? one who spreads strife among brethren. Do you know what the last of those Beatitudes was? Peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers. This is, God hates somebody who spreads strife. You know, working in the trades, it seemed like every day you go to work, and the first thing as you're getting ready to go out and do whatever job it is, there's a gathering of guys. And there's always one that's... You know what that is? What is that? Stirring the pot. Spreading strife among brethren. Here it says this God hates more than anything else. Somebody who spreads strife among brethren. So next time we get the temptation to spread some strife, think about where it falls in God's like list. Man, I'll tell you what, that's a scary thought, because I know I've done that. I know I have. Scary. Because it's the tendency of everybody, when you're dissatisfied with something, start stirring that pot, get people on our side. So many things in this book that tells you what works and what doesn't work. Go to Proverbs chapter 64, or Proverbs chapter 10, where we were before. Let's take a look at that one again. I want to read that and just make a couple of comments about the words that are found in here. Beginning in verse 11. The mouth, chapter 10, verse 11 of Proverbs. The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life. Only such a word as is good for edification, building up, according to the need of the moment, so that it may give grace to those who hear. Well, the mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all transgressions. Have you ever noticed how you talk differently about things? Like if it's somebody that we really love, you don't say anything about what happened. You don't go out telling everybody about what happened if it's not a good thing. You're not anxious to reveal those things if it's somebody you really care about. But if it's somebody you're a little bit on the wanting to do that with. Did you hear what? Did you hear what? Hey, have you heard what they just... So easy to get into that mode where we do those kind of things. But what he says is the mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life. If there is a problem with somebody, if there is something that somebody's doing, why not go to them and admonish them as a brother? Reprove them? Do whatever is necessary to build that situation, to correct that situation, rather than tell everybody about what an idiot they are? Love covers all transgressions. There's some things I don't want people to know about my family. Not going to necessarily hide it, but it's not the first thing I'm going to tell people either. I'll tell you what, I've met people in... One time I went to the airport and I was sitting there waiting for my flight. And a guy sits down beside me, and in 10 minutes I knew every dirty thing about everything that had happened in his life. I was thinking to myself, what is wrong with you, dude? Are you daft? I don't need to know. I don't want to know those things. Don't be telling me that kind of stuff. And I'm sure in the next airport, he sat down beside somebody and told them the same things. It doesn't take long for a fool to vent. And that's what happens. But as you read this, as you go on, it says, on the lips of the discerning. Discerning. That is people that can see, people that understand, people that know. It says, on the lips of the discerning, wisdom is found. But a rod is for the back of him who lacks understanding. There's always the two extremes in this world. Wise men store up knowledge. That last quotation there. It says, on the lips of the discerning wisdom is found, but a rod is for the back of him who lacks understanding. Wise men store up knowledge, but with a mouth, the foolish, ruin is at hand. You know, there's another statement here. Verse 19. You ever met somebody that just talks incessantly? I read this and I think about, Darryl, shut up. Just be quiet. Because it says, where there are many words, transgression is unavoidable. You ever thought about what that means? The more you talk, the more chance there is you're getting in trouble. The more chance there is, because you run out of things to say after a while and you start saying things you shouldn't be saying. With many words, you're going to mess up somewhere. So shut up. He who restrains his lips is wise. The tongue of the righteous is choice as choice silver, and the heart of the wicked is worth little. The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for a lack of understanding. Doing wickedness is like sport to a fool. I've met people, and I think I've even been there, where wickedness was a sport. I hate to admit that. That's one of those things I probably shouldn't tell you. But I've been there in my life where wickedness was a sport. Feet running rapidly to evil with greediness. But you know what? So is wisdom. It's sport. Wisdom is sport to a man of understanding. It's fun. Wisdom is fun when you understand it. Wisdom is fun when you can see what can be done, what can be created by having the proper answer at the proper time to solve a problem. We either solve with what we say or we make things worse. It's your turn. It's your turn to talk. How are you going to use the words that are at your disposal? You going to fix it? Or are you going to make it worse? That's every day, all day long, what we're faced with. If you're subject to the gospel call this morning, you know your life has not been what it should be. Listen to the wisdom that comes from God's Word. Won't you turn yourself around, come back to God, be one of those people that He will say, well done, good and faithful servant, come on in. Come while we stand and sing.